Okay, this is the new player guide for anyone who's new or returning to Manasoul. Is not yet used to the new changes they have or the difference that this has as opposed to other MMOs that are like it. Quests work similarly to how they do in other MMOs. As you go around, you'll find them and then you just accept them. Most of them go down to just kill X amount of enemies, so kill like 15 hurdles, get 150 XP. It's important to note you don't have to do every quest in this game, but it is recommended to. You just level better that way, you level easier. Yeah. One thing you might notice as you're leveling and doing this quest is when you kill an enemy, sometimes you get XP, sometimes you don't. The way this works is if the enemy is 4 levels higher than you, you will gain XP. So if you're level 1 and they're level 1, you'll gain XP. If they're level 2, you'll gain XP. 3, they'll gain XP. 4, you gain XP. However, if you are 4 levels higher than them, you will not gain XP. So if you're level 5 and they're level 4, you don't gain XP. If you do, it's very small amount, up until you're 4 levels higher and you'll gain nothing. They go over this in the tutorial a little bit, but I'll explain it in a little bit more depth. The schools of Magick for this game, Arcane, Elementalism, Enchantment, Evocation, and Martial, are very similar to what you would see as classes in other games. We'll go over those each individually. Okay, the first one we're going to go over is Arcane. Arcane is basically they're just like your basic spells. So you've got Magic Bolt, which is the first spell you get, which is just a small damage that just does fixed amount of damage. So always does 15, doesn't scale off anything, that's it. Then you've got Recall, which will take you back to the main city, which is just the Gemshine city where you go right after the tutorial. It'll always take you back there. It has no global cooldown, so it doesn't have any of that. It's just use it at once a minute and you'll be back there. Next one is Sprint. Sprint will increase your movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. This is really helpful for moving around the map, and also certain bosses or trials we'll go over later. They require you to be very quick sometimes, or to avoid stuns, that kind of thing. Next one is Expose. Expose is one that is very important. It makes the target take 5% more damage for 10 seconds. This is the one you're going to be using against bosses. This is one you're going to use against stronger enemies. This is one you'll use against world bosses, which we'll talk later. Okay, next one we're going to go over is Elementalism. Elementalism is sort of your all-rounder, but I like to think of it as a mid-range attacker, a mid-range DPS. A lot of those spells are all about doing lots of damage, sort of sustaining damage over time, that kind of thing. This is more so in the fire. The fire elementalism is really about damage over time. It's all about just how much damage can you just stack on an enemy at once. The different kinds of elementalism, like for water or wind or earth, they'll probably act differently than this, but this is the one I have experience with, so yeah. Okay, next we're going to go over is Enchantment. Enchantment is your healing class. It's like your priest if you've ever played a WoW. They're all about just healing your allies, making sure everybody is all healed up, your tanks don't die, your DPSs stay DPSing. Some of them have a lot of buffs too, like take for example Heart Flame, the ultimate for fire. It's all about healing AoE, and also increases the primary stats by 5%, which is really nice if you have 2 DPSs, or even if you just want to do a little bit more healing. If you're having some issues there, you can heal a lot better for a little bit longer. Every of the elements have a damage spell with enchantment, so White Flame is the one for fire. It's a decent amount of damage, but it's just meant to get the job done. It's not really meant to be used as the primary damager, because you're all about healing and helping your allies. That's pretty much it for this one. Okay, for the next one, we're going to talk about Evocation. Evocation is your ranged DPS. They are I'm going to do a lot of damage, and I'm going to stand all the way a mile away while I do it. So a lot of their spells are down to casting, like huge cast times with huge payoffs. Like they do, I think they can do some insane damage if you spec them right. I'm looking at a few of these fire spells for them. Like Combustion, the first spell you get has 175% scaling. That's pretty good. Blue Flame, which allows you to replenish and deal damage, which is nice. Or the best one of them all, Meteor, the ultimate for them, which is insane. I think it scales 400 or 500%. It does insane amounts of damage. So if you really like the sort of mage, probably say mage, all of them are mages, but like from World of Warcraft, take like the mages. high damage from way back away, these are the class for you. If you want to do tons of damage and you don't want to get hit, you don't want to have to deal with the health or the dodging attacks, Evocation's for you. Okay, now for Manasoul. I'm going to split this one up between two, because you have your DPS Manasoul and you have your tanking Manasouls, and the differences between those is quite big. For the DPS side of Manasoul, they are your I'm doing a lot of damage, I'm melee, I'm up close, I'm hitting them. If you're playing Wind Manasoul, it's about dashing, you're moving around, not sitting still at all, you're a heavy hitter. I think Wind Manasoul or any of the Manasoul classes do like the most damage in the game at the cost of getting hit a lot. But they're all about no cast times, just hitting things, just doing damage, just sitting. I got my sword, I'm standing next to you, and I'm killing you. That's what they do. They're closing the distance between mages, making sure you're just always keeping pressure. They make great DPSs. Okay, now for the tanking side of Manasoul, they use the same spells, but you just use them differently. So they're all about pulling aggro, making sure none of the other people get hit. I'm gonna stand there, I've got 6,000 health, I'm just taking all the hits, I'm keeping the enemies away from my healers, I'm keeping them away from my ranged attackers, and I'm taking the damage. So I'm getting hit, I don't even care, I'm healing, I'm all good. Okay, now I'm gonna explain the differences between the elements. So your elements are pretty simple, they're just fire, water, earth, and then wind. They're all pretty unique and very different from each other. So, fire is the first one we're going to go over. It's all about damage over time and sustaining yourself. Look at Ignite, for example. It's about dealing damage over time. You take Enchantment, you've got Fireflies, healing over time. You look at Invocation, you've got Burnout, Erupt, which are just big damage with damage over times. You look at Manasoul, it's got Siphon Heat, it's got Meteor Dive, Fire Rage, all those about sustaining yourself and just making sure you're doing as much damage as possible. That's kind of what it is for Fire. It's all about the damage over time, sustaining. You keep your mana up, keeping your health up, keeping all that stuff up. Okay, if you look at Wind next, it's all about dashing, it's all about attacking fast, being fast. Looking at some of the martial skills or the evocation skills, you can see it's all about, I'm attacking really fast, I'm hitting really fast, I'm dashing around, I'm moving. It's your movement. It's similar to, I would say it's like a rogue from WoW. You're moving around, you're doing high damage, you're just moving around. You're never sitting still. You're doing your own thing. Yeah. Okay, now for water. Water is all about AoE and area of effect attacks. They're pretty much all about I'm hitting a bunch of enemies at the same time. If you look at some of the martial skills, you'll see that's definitely true. Look at some of the evocation skills, that's also very true. Even their enchantment skills are all about healing, like in AoEs. Doing a lot of that. They have a lot of stuns and slows as well. So they're kind of I would call them like a crowd control class. They're very good at keeping all the enemies debuffed and keeping everything good and healed and AoE and all that. That's about it. Last one we're going to look at is Earth. It's all about shields and stuns. If you look at the elementalism tree, you can see Stone Coffin and things like Earth Embrace, Traumatic Shockwave. If you look at the elementalism, you can see Granite Shield, Plate Shift. The martial one's all about stone armor, getting your shields up and your armor up and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a big fan of popping shields a lot, not so much on the healing side, or they can do quite a bit of damage, but more so on this just shielding, stunning, making sure that the enemies aren't attacking you as much, aren't doing as much damage to your allies or yourself, you'd probably like this one. Okay, since we just went over the elements, we're going to go over specializations. Specializations are sort of like a second element you can have on top of your primary one. We only have 3 right now, but they're planning on adding more, so I'll probably remake this guide sometime in the future when they've added some more of them. Okay, the first one we're going to go over is Ice. Ice scales off evocation, so if you've got a lot of evocation, I would definitely recommend using Ice. If you don't have a lot or using dual spec, I'm not quite sure if that's my first choice, but it can be pretty strong. Ice is very similar to the fire evocation one. If you ever use that, it's very strong. A lot of damage, pretty good damage over time. But the main skill I see people use with it are Ice Lance. It sort of shoots out like a short beam of ice at an enemy. And the other one is the AoE spell they have, their ultimate, which does like a big snowstorm. Does a lot of good damage. Really good at crowd control. Yeah, that's this. Okay, now for lightning. Lightning is pretty cool. It scales off of Manasoul. So if you're using a Manasoul build, or even if you're using like either one DPS or tank, it's really helpful with. It's big damage. Okay, so its main skills are all about being really fast and doing high amounts of damage. It charges what's called overcharge. So as you use your skills, you'll notice there's little lightning beams underneath you. That's charging overcharge. Each stack of that, I'm not entirely sure what it does, but from my understanding, it increases your damage and also charges your ultimate skill. So once you get enough of them, your ultimate skill will do insane amounts of damage. It sort of shoots out a shockwave in every direction a bunch of times. It makes you like immune to all damage, I believe, or most damage, and also just shoots just tons of damage. I like to run that as my tank, so I'll run the ultimate skill, I'll run the basic skill, and then I'll run the recovery skill. Recovery skill is also one I see who use a lot because it increases your speed, and it also gives you some charge of overcharge. That was a weird sentence, but yeah, it's really nice. It's really big damage, really fast. It's good. Okay, for the final one, it's nature. Nature scales with elementalism, so if you're using an Eller build like I am, you'd really like this. It's really cool. This one is very similar to like fire elementalism, I would say, but they're also very different in their own right, because every time you use a basic spell like Spirit Bird or Nature's Bounty, it gives you a stack of lilies. And once you get a stat max of 2, which is all you can really hold, you can use your either ultimate Lily Bell or you can use Nightshade. And both of those spells are insane damage. But what honestly I think makes this the most unique is that all of those cooldowns are less than 20 seconds. Like, the highest cooldown you have is 20 seconds for Flower Field, and even then, that 20 seconds goes by so fast. Most of the spells, including their ultimate, is so little cooldown. And you can just spam these abilities. And their damage, I mean, it's not the best damage, but having a secondary spammable on top of your main, so if you're using Fire Elementalism, for example, you can use, like, Fireball, and you can use Flame Trail, and you can use Ignite, all while stacking these, lilies, and then just immediately pop your ultimate, and just keep doing that over and over. So every 10 seconds, you're able to use an ultimate, which does a lot. This thing does a lot of damage. I mean, it's 25 plus 180% elementalism damage. This is insane amounts of damage. It doesn't look like that at first, like, okay, well, that's decent, but it's no better than the other spell. Yeah, but then you use Expose, and then you use Nightshade, and then you combine that with Flower Field, which makes it to where you can use all of your skills for free, all of your, nature skills for free, no cost. Nothing at all, just mana. So you can just spam your Lily Bell and your Nature's Bounty over and over and over again, and you will do insane amounts of damage. It is by far my favorite spec in this whole game. Using Fire Elementalism combined with Nature Elementalism, which is all it can be, is so fun. It's the most fun I had playing this game. When I was doing the world bosses for the first time right after getting Nature's Bounty, after getting Nature's spec, it was so fun. It's amazing. It's the best spec in the game. It makes this, if you're gonna play this game, I'd recommend playing Elementalism just for the nature spec alone, because of how much fun you'll have with this. You hit level 50, you get that nature spec, and it's so fun. There isn't a feeling like it. Okay, next we're going to talk about is cooldown groups. Now, cooldown groups are when your spells go on cooldown and what spells go on cooldown when you use a spell. A better way to explain this is if you look at Fireball, we're using Fire Elementalism, so this says cooldown group is Burst. And if you also look at Spirit Bird here, which is the Nature's one, it also says Burst. So if I were to use Fireball, it would put both those spells on cooldown. And if I were to use Spirit Bird, it would put both those spells on cooldown as well. This does not just extend to just ones in the same tree. So if I use Fireball, it puts every single Burst spell on cooldown. If I were to use cooldown, the spell, not the thing, it would put all recovery skills on cooldown. Another thing you might notice is that sometimes they say they ignore global cooldown. Well, what is global cooldown? So essentially, if I were to use a spell, actually another good example here is Fireball. So if I use Fireball, any spell that does not say ignores global cooldown will go on cooldown for half a second. That's to prevent you from spamming all of your spells at once. The best example you have is Manasoul. all martial skills do not ignore global cooldown, so they all have global cooldown, all of them. So if I use Siphon Heat or Heat Blade, I have to wait half a second before doing any of them. Okay, that's it. Okay, next on the agenda is differences between trials, delves, and dungeons. So as you explore the land of Valeria, you'll see different kinds of skulls. I'll be explaining here what they mean and what they do. So the first one is the white skulls. You'll see these are the first ones you'll encounter when you start playing the game. You'll see a sort of white skull that glows. That is what's known as a trial. Trials are solo dungeons, or solo instants, meaning you can only one person can enter them at a time. That's it. They're typically very easy, or sometimes some of them are a little on the harder side, but nothing too hard. They're all soloable and all fairly not too hard. Another thing to note is when you beat a trial, it will be show because the blue aura around it will go away. So as the skull sort of glows, it will just disappear and it will just be a regular skull. If you want, it's recommended that you do all of these trials as you go through the game. But feel free to skip a few if they're too difficult, because you don't need to do all of them. You just need to do about a little more than half. Then you'll get to max level. Okay, next thing are delves. Delves are the black ones. These ones are usually used by 2 to 4 people. They're typically only done with 2. They're a little harder. They're like harder trials, or mini dungeons, if you will. They're usually about 5 minutes to do. You'll fight a couple enemies, then you'll fight a boss like you would in any other dungeon. They're essentially just really small, compact dungeons. I believe all of them have a little mission you can do in them to get a little bit of extra XP. And they all drop, all the bosses in the delves will drop a memory depending on what area they're in. So I believe you get 2 per each. I'm not entirely sure on that though, as I haven't done these in a while. But they're usually not too hard, and most of them can be soloed. Most things in this game can be soloed. Okay, now for the last one, dungeons. The only dungeon in the game right now is what's known as Mephine's Font, or Mephine's Font. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, but it's 4 people. You need 4 people. These are end game things. Like I'm level 50. I've done a few world bosses. I've got a group. I've got a healer. I've got 2 DPS. I've got a tank. We're taking on a dungeon. These are like big delves. If you've done delves before, they're like massive. The Mephine's Font itself is pretty big. It takes a while to beat, and the boss is no joke sometimes. It's not too hard once you learn the mechanics, but going in blind, it can be quite a challenge. Learning what to do and all the different mechanics of it can be a little tricky. Dungeon, they do have a new dungeon coming out soon, which I'll make a guide on when it comes out. But yeah, dungeons are 4 people. Make sure you have a healer and make sure you have a tank. Anything else can kind of be swapped out. If you've got a semi-confident DPS, you can usually use that 4th slot for another healer or another DPS, depending on what your group needs. Yeah, dungeons are incredibly difficult. Well, not incredibly difficult. They're really difficult. Dungeons are hard. They're hard delves, basically. But the loot you get from them is definitely worth it. Okay, now for the other in-game, in-game content, is what's known as world bosses, or just WB, whatever you want to call them. Essentially, there are 3 bosses that spawn every other hour, or every 2 hours. So for me, it's always on odd times. And they always spawn every 2 hours. You can't make them spawn any earlier. If you spawn them later, they will still, let's say you beat one at 8:59, right? It will spawn again in a minute. It will spawn back. It's just how it works. They are pretty difficult. They're usually done with about 5 or 6 people, but you can definitely do them solo if you're playing a tank. Even with 2 people, you just have a tank and a healer. The loot they give, they drop stuff for the memories for Giant's Banner. And the Giant's Banner has some of the coolest weapons in the game, in my opinion. They're usually not too hard, but they are in game. You do have to be level 50 to get them. The world boss that we have right now are Lifewell, Ruby Eater, or Big Worm. And then we have Rajan. Rajan he's not that hard. I'll do a more in-depth guide on them later. But the world bosses are just essentially there to keep you playing as consistently. Yeah, that's it. Okay, another thing about the world bosses is what makes them different between delves or trials and dungeons is that you don't need a party to join them. They just go on. So you'll see a portal, you walk in, now you're joining. They are sort of like a community. They're kind of like a community event, which will be they're pretty interesting. They're fun. If you do get to the point where you're doing them pretty consistently, you'll see some pretty similar people doing it, and you can get to some pretty cool guilds. Usually you find about I'd say about 2 or 3 people in a guild, and they're just kind of talking, just kind of that thing. They're very nice to do. If you get to endgame, I definitely recommend checking out the world bosses, but probably not the dungeons if you're just not into that kind of thing, but definitely do the world bosses. Next thing we're going to talk about is the gear system. I think Manasoul has a pretty unique gear system, and I think it's better than how other games do it. Okay, first thing is runes. Runes are like sort of how your main gear. They're what give you your primary stats. So there's 5 different types of runes, which are heart runes, body runes, mind runes, soul runes, and then magic runes. And each of these runes will give you a specific stat, which you can then roll on to get better ones. They also all give you a percent, and runes are, much like gear, are separated between rare and super rares, with super rares giving you a better bonus and rares just not giving you much. This is where most of your stats are going to come from. They don't really usually change the effects unless you they don't really change the effects of your gear or your attacks much, but they do definitely change your stats. They're where you get the bulk of your stats from. Later on, you'll get 16 plus 8%, but early on, you usually spike 5 plus 3%, which are really good. That's it for runes. Next thing we're going to talk about is weapons. As the name implies, they're just like weapons. So you get ones for elementalism or martial or evocation, and they're like your auto attack. So if you use your E attack, let's say Heartmind for example, it will scale off of elementalism. It does base damage of 65, and then you'll notice that they have different effects. So this one reduces your cooldown by 10%. And much like the runes, they're separated between rarities. Rare being just the basic easy ones to get, super rare being a little bit harder to get, and hyper rare being really hard to get. These are where your different kind of effects for weapons come from. So if you look at the Bloody Blade, you'll see its attacks inflict, all of the attacks with this weapon will inflict a taunt. So this is good for a tanking build. Or if you look at Minfina's Wish, it has an 8% chance to give you Minfina's gift, granting 50% cooldown reduction. This is good for an evocation person who's using a lot of big spells and that kind of thing. So your weapon is sort of that's your primary hitter, that's your special ability, that's your stat. That's it's kind of like a passive skill, kind of, if you will. Sort of like just your passives. I think the weapon systems are pretty cool. All of the weapons all of them have a unique attack. Some of them share the same sort of animation, but they're all incredibly unique between each other. So the differences between the level 12 super rare and level 12 rare is not just more better stats, it's also attacks differently. They just straight up have different animations, different hitboxes and all that stuff. So it kind of makes your build feel more unique. Choosing between to use a hyper rare, which is a lot of damage, or using a super rare, which doesn't do as much but has a better hitbox or something. It helps keep your builds unique and fresh. Next thing we're going to talk about are accessories. Accessories just give you some extra stats, and they give you some HP. So if you look at the Berserker necklace, 30 martial, 30 enchanting, these are good for, martial and enchanting. Or the jungle defender, which gives you armor and ward and resolve, which is pretty nice. But the cool thing about accessories is that along the way, you'll find ones that give you a bonus to all stats. So let's say I wanted to use elementalism and enchanting. Well, yeah, I could choose to use energy bands, but they don't give me any enchanting. When I'm I want to use my spells. Okay, well, I'll use this other one. I think it's called the Jadewood Pendant, I think, to give me some extra enchanting. So now I can cast healing spells, and I get a bonus to re-up my elementalism and other stuff. So I want to sort of cross build, and it only loses out on 5 points. So right now, it's not the biggest deal because it's a 5-point difference. So the damage between that isn't much. And the accessories, they help you sort of make combo builds. So if you want to spec into 2 things at once, you want to use, you really want to change what your accessory is. Last thing we're going to talk about here are the cosmetics. So those are your armor, your hats, your pets, your auras, your capes, and your titles. The most important thing to note about is probably for the titles is that once you equip a title, you cannot unequip it. It's on forever. It's permanent. So I have the title of hero because I'm the hero, right? I can't get rid of the title unless I were to take another one like Dummy or the Immortal that would replace my current title, but I can never go back to having no title. I don't know if they ever plan on doing that, but as of right now, you cannot clear your titles, to my knowledge. As for the other things, hats, clothes, auras, pets, and capes, you get those by playing the game, or some of them you can get from buying in the cash shop, which we'll talk about way later on. So like hats, these are all just cosmetics though. They're all just cosmetics. So aura are like just effects that happen to you and to your weapons. Pets are just a little guy who sits next to you, which you're gonna get reworked sometime in the future. Obviously, clothes are just like your outfit. Your hats are your hat. And your cape is like wings or like a bigger cape there, that kind of thing. That's it for the cosmetics. Now we're going to talk about how you get these gear that I'm talking about and what the pity system is in this game. Now, you might notice when you play the game is that it teaches you how to roll for gear, but it doesn't really do a great job of explaining what rolling for gear is. So, let's say I kill this world boss, right? And now I have a giant Slayer memory. And I use that. Well, you might notice there's a bunch of numbers here. Like, what does this mean? Why does it say 5% chance for super rare? Or what does the 14 out of 100 mean? Or the 0 out of 10? These are what's called the pity system. So, if I were to roll 10 of any kind of memory, I get a guaranteed super rare. And if I roll 100 of any memory, I get a guaranteed hyper rare. This is really helpful for if you're like running the same dungeon over and over again, and you just can't seem to get the one you want. Like, you just can't. This will help you sort of always have a clear goal in mind. You always think, okay, I'm just 30 away. Okay, I'm just 20 away. You always know how far you are away. And rolling on gear, when it comes to weapons and accessories, it's always the same. All the stats are always the same. However, what differs from this is in the runes. Now, when rolling for runes, what happens is you'll find either a profound faded or a profound sigil. And when you open that sigil, it has a chance to be either super rare or rare. Unless you're using profound, then it's always super rare. And those will change your stats. Those are like, you find an elementalism that gives you 4 plus 5% or 3 plus 4%, or that kind of thing. That's where you get those. You'll find these by just killing mobs. I think the main way you get them by killing mobs. Get a couple by opening chests and just sort of playing the game and exploring. You don't really ever feel like you have to grind them until you get to like the later levels. So like, I would say about level 48 to 50, it's really common when you start grinding for runes, but you'll never really have to worry about that early on. I think that's it for the rolling system. Okay, one thing you might notice as you're playing the game or looking through the UI is something called a world blessing. Well, what are world blessings? World blessings are buffs that people can give to the whole server that will sort of give them a bonus or something. So let's say you wanted to use one of these world blessings on somebody. Well, how do you get them? Well, the only way you can get them as of right now is by buying them in the cash shop. That might sound pay to win, but honestly it's not, since it's applied to the whole server, and honestly they're not too different. The 3 world buffs we have right now are XP, which increases your XP by 25% for an hour. So all of these last an hour. You can even queue them up. So like, let's say I got 2 XP ones and I used them at the same time. Well, an hour goes by. As soon as that one ends, another one will immediately start back up, and you actually see the queue timers there, and that's how that works. Next one is speed. So the speed world blessing increases everybody's movement speed by 50%, or by 50. I don't remember exactly what it is, as nobody really uses this one. It grants it to all players, and much like the EXP one, they can be queued up. Now the last one and most common one to be used is luck. So the luck world buff it does not increase your chance to get rares or super rares. It increases the odds that monsters drop things. So let's say you kill, it's mostly used for Minfina's Font. So let's say you kill one of the Font Guardians or the Patriarchs that are there, right? Well, they usually have a 50% chance to drop something. I think it's 25% chance to drop something. It's 25 or 50. Well, this will increase that by 25%. So you might think, oh, okay, so that increases it to like, let's say if it's 25%, it increases to 50%. No, it does not. It increases that 25% by 25%. So you can do the math on that. This one is the most common to use, as it's really helpful when grinding things. Like, let's say you're grinding a really rare pet, or you're really rare like droppy one, or some runes. Well, using this will make things drop much quicker and better. That's it. That's it for the world blessings. Okay, so one thing you might notice is that you can move all of the UI, like all of it. So you can move your nameplate, like your HP. You can move your inventory. You can move your spells. You can move your chat, all of that. let's say you found a good spot where you want to like put all your stuff. Well, down there in the bottom right corner, you'll see a lock. If you just right click that, now it might seem like it would lock all UI, but as of right now it doesn't. It locks your HP bar and it locks your strike spells, so you can't move those around anymore. Okay, next thing I'm going to go over is the map. The map is quite large, honestly. It's pretty big. So I'm just going to sort of go over the icons and what they mean. Yeah. Okay, for the first, you've got the white skulls. Those are the trials. The black skulls are the delves, and the red one is the dungeons. Then you've got the sort of like big like faces. Those are the world bosses, but they're kind of like the Arbok from Pokemon. Those are the world bosses. I believe there's 3 of them right now. Yeah. Then you've got these little houses. Those are just like important locations. So you've got the Seashell Hamlet. You've got the Ruby Landing. You've got Grice Family Farm, Training Room. That whole thing. Those are just sort of pointing out the areas of interest. And you've obviously got like the big area in the middle, which is Gemshine, the major city. And then you've got your little player character, which is highlighted in green. I believe it only shows your player. It doesn't show anyone else around or anything like that. Yeah, that's the world map. Okay, now for the mini-map. The mini-map shows you a lot more detail. So green is you, like on the main map. But then the little like white squares, those are going to be like friendly mobs, so like friendly NPCs. The red is obviously enemies, but on the mini-map you might also spot little like markers. Those are just quest markers that show you all the quests in the area. You can actually kind of see the chest, which will also come up as little white boxes once you've gotten them. So, that's another thing to know. Yep, that's it for the map. I personally don't ever use the mini-map, I just kind of find it gets in the way, but you can move that however you want as well, like all the other UI. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is the guild system. So why would you want to join a guild, and what do they do? Well, guilds are mostly, what I like to use them for is just getting your friends or people you find that you like, or you know, good chemistry with, just in a area where you can sort of contact each other easily. You could also just use Discord, that kind of thing. But I think guilds just kind of make it feel more connected to the game. It also helps you show who's online, that whole thing. The main reason people join guilds is for the guild bank, which we'll go over in a little bit. The reason I like them is because it helps you find people who you know, semi-know, who can run dungeons with you. Let's see if you got like 10 level 50 people, which, I mean, good luck even finding that many. In a guild, you can all just sort of group up easy and get into the game and all that. You know, don't have to like deal with spamming, looking for good posts, or asking random people you come across. You just kind of got that whole thing. For the ranks of the guild, there's only 4 of them: Novice, Acolyte, Seer, and Archmage. We'll go over each of those individually. So a Novice is essentially just the beginner. You just started out, like you just joined the guild, like maybe that second or that minute, so you don't have any guild, you have no guild permissions, you can't access the bank, I mean, I think you can look in it, but that's it. You can't take items out, you can't put items, you can't invite anybody. The Acolyte is allowed to invite people, and I believe they can put things into the guild but they cannot take anything out of the guild bank. These are kind of like I'm still pretty new to the guild, but I'm kind of getting my way up there. The Seer is allowed to access the guild bank fully and also invite people and promote people up to Acolyte. So if you're a Seer, you're able to invite, promote, take items out of the guild bank, and put items in the guild bank. So this is kind of like I'd say most people would be Seers. Your Novice and your Acolytes are still just kind of like your new players. You don't really trust them fully, you don't really know them, that kind of thing. Now Archmage, that's your guild master, that's the guild leader. That's the person who started the guild, or that's the person who was given the guild. So if you ever decide that you don't want to be a part of your guild anymore, you want to leave, do better things, or quit the game, you're allowed to transfer. You're the only person allowed to promote up to Seer. You can invite anybody you want. You can also kick people. You can kick anyone you want. You can access any of the guild stuff. So you can upgrade. Another feature that the Archmage can do is they can upgrade the guild. They're the only person who can upgrade the guild. So upgrading your bank, buying guild housing, upgrading storage space, all that. They're the final say anything that happens with the guild. Okay, now for the banks. The banks is kind of simple, but also some people get this tripped up. So there are 3 banks in this game: your personal bank, your shared bank, and the guild bank. for your personal bank, any items you store in there will just only go to that character. So if you've got 47 gold, you really don't want to lose that gold by, someone, I don't know, I don't think you can lose gold, but let's just say you really want to store your gold. You put your gold in your bank, now only that character can access that gold, nobody else can get to the bank, you're the only person allowed in the bank. Any items you store in there will be tied to you, and only you. Now, for the shared bank, let's say I have 2 characters. One of them is level 50, one of them is level 2. But I don't want to go out and grind for new gear, I already have all my gear. Well, I'll take my level 50 character who has, let's say, a super rare level 1 motion weapon. I put that in my shared bank, and now my level 2 can go in that shared bank and access that. So that's sort of like a way to trade between yourself without really trading. So anything that goes in the shared bank can only be seen by your characters. So any of your characters, nobody else. Like, another player can't go in and look at my shared bank. They can only see their shared bank. That's it for the shared banks. Now for the last one is guild bank. The only way to access the guild bank is to be in a guild and be at least a seer or acolyte. I think acolytes can put things into the guild bank. So the way guild banks work is they're sort of like extra storage. That's what I use them for, at least, or just storing items I don't want anymore. But you can also use them to give things to other people. Like, if you the person in my guild I want to trade with, but we don't play it very often. Okay, I'll put a weapon in here that he'll need, and then they can grab it anytime they want. Or if you want to store things for anyone to use, or stockpile gold, or if you have a bunch of runes and you want people to use them, and you're not going to use them, you can put them in the guild bank, that kind of thing. Right now, I think the guild bank is pretty much extra storage though, so any items you don't have or don't want, you pop them in the guild bank, people take them out, people put them in, do what you want, that kind of thing. Okay, I think that completes this new player guide. If you find this helpful, thank you, I tried my best on this. If I have any other things I need to add, I'll probably put it in new videos, and I'll be updating this guide every expansion. So every time there's an expansion or major change, I'll just make a new guide and make sure to put in the description that this one's obsolete. So just make sure you check that. I hope you have fun playing this game, and honestly, a good thing to note is that this game might start out really slow, but I truly do believe in it. I think this game has potential to be really, really great. I love it. I think it's the best MMO I've ever played. The community's nice, the game is fun, has a good core gameplay loop. Just give it some time, and I think you'll find something here that you'll really like. That's it. Hope you enjoyed.